After the storm of her divorce had passed, I found solace in a quiet corner of the city, where homes were spaced just far enough apart to promise peace. The move was meant to be a fresh start, not just for me, but for Rayan, my 17-year-old stepson who, surprisingly, chose to stay with me instead of going with his father. That choice alone gave me hope. We weren't bound by blood, but I had raised him since he was 5. To me, he was my son. The neighborhood was peaceful, filled with whispering trees and the occasional chirp of distant birds. It was a place where stories went to rest, not begin. Or so I thought. Salma lived next door, an elegant woman with eyes that always seemed to know more than they let on. She introduced herself with a smile and a plate of warm cinnamon bread. Her presence was soothing, like a gentle hum in the background of my chaos. Our friendship blossomed effortlessly. Morning coffee turned into evening walks, and soon I found myself confiding in her the way one does with an old friend. She listened more than she spoke, but when she did speak, her words always lingered. "I sense your heart still heavy," she said one afternoon as we sat under my porch. "But not all bonds are broken by papers. Some are written in spirit." I thought she was talking about my marriage, but perhaps she meant more. Rayan had been reserved since the move, which wasn't unusual for a teenager. But lately, his silences were different, less moody, more distant. He stopped joining me for dinner, choosing instead to lock himself in his room. When I asked, he brushed it off. School stress, tiredness, needing space. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Salma, however, took an unexpected interest in him. She'd ask about his hobbies, his future, his dreams. "He has a powerful mind," she once said, watching him from her window as he worked in the garden. "You must guide him well." Something about the way she said it made my skin prickle. The first time I felt it, an unshakable fatigue, I was alone. It crept in slowly, like fog across glass. My limbs felt heavier. My sleep grew restless. Nightmares of whispering voices and unseen shadows began plaguing me. I dismissed it as stress or maybe the new environment. But the feeling didn't leave, and then one night I saw it, through the window. Rayan standing outside Salma's front door, well past midnight. She opened it with a smile, and they disappeared inside together, without a word. My chest tightened. I had questions. But more than that, I had a feeling I couldn't name, one that wrapped around my ribs and whispered, "Something is not right." Little did I know that moment was the first thread pulled from a web I hadn't seen until it was too late. Days passed, but that vision of Rayan slipping into Salma's house lingered like smoke in my memory. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I watched, closely. What had once been normal teenage aloofness now felt like calculated distance. He avoided eye contact, spoke in clipped sentences, and seemed always preoccupied. When I asked where he'd been that night, he lied, easily. "Just went for a walk. Couldn't sleep," he said without blinking, but his eyes didn't match his words. Salma, on the other hand, remained as gracious as ever. She visited with baskets of fruit, warm soup, soft smiles. Her concern for my health became oddly persistent. "You look pale," she'd comment gently, brushing my arm with her cool fingers. "Are you sleeping well?" I wanted to trust her. I needed to. But beneath her kindness, there was a rhythm too perfect, too rehearsed, and my body kept betraying me. Sleep brought no rest. I woke up drenched in sweat, my breath catching on the edge of invisible panic. At first, I thought it was anxiety or perhaps something medical. I scheduled a checkup. Everything came back normal. Still, the dreams persisted. Whispers, indistinct murmuring just outside comprehension, haunted my nights. I started locking my bedroom door as though a latch could keep out the unease curling around my bed. Then came the oddities. Items I had never misplaced vanished. My silver pendant, a photo of Rayan as a child, a strand of hair from my brush. I found a strange mark drawn faintly beneath my mattress, a symbol I didn't recognize. I chalked it up to stress, but the fear settled deeper. One evening, a new neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly widow, caught me outside. "Strange to see your boy and Salma so close," she remarked casually. "They're always by the back fence at night, whispering, 'Secretive pair.'" My stomach dropped. That night, I waited. I turned off all the lights and sat by the living room window. Sure enough, at midnight, I saw them. Rayan and Salma, their faces half-shadowed, murmuring under the moonlight. Her hand rested briefly on his shoulder. He nodded solemnly, as if in agreement to something I couldn't hear. I barely slept. By morning, I was unraveling. I searched the house and found an old voice recorder from a drawer. That night, I placed it under my bed before lying down. The next morning, I pressed play. At first, just silence. Then footsteps. Then a whisper. Rayan's voice, low and rhythmic. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was eerie. Unnatural. And then Salma's voice followed, soft but commanding, almost chanting. I dropped the recorder. My hands trembled. Whatever they were doing, it was deliberate. The bond I had with Rayan, once built on trust and love, was beginning to crack. And now, the cracks were speaking in voices I didn't recognize. The truth sat heavy on my chest like a stone. That recording confirmed the fear I had buried beneath denial. Something dark was happening beneath my roof, between my son and my neighbor. The sound of Rayan's voice, altered and mechanical, paired with Salma's strange cadence, wasn't just alarming. It was chilling. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next morning, I confronted Rayan. I played the recording in front of him. His face drained of color, but he didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. He simply stared at the device, then at me, eyes flat, unreadable. "I did what I had to do," he said, voice low. I felt my knees weaken. "What does that mean, Rayan? What did you do to me?" He looked past me, as if addressing a memory, instead of a person. "She showed me the truth. You're the reason my life feels stuck. My real mother's spirit. She's reaching out to me. Salma helped me see that. You're in the way." My heart cracked in a place I didn't know existed. I had raised this boy. I had kissed his bruised knees, held him through nightmares, shielded him from the storm of his father's absence. And now, he stood in front of me, cold, convinced, and distant. "Salma told you this?" I asked, though the answer was already clear. He nodded. "She said there are energies that block destiny. You've been keeping me weak, but not anymore." Each word was a blade. I backed away, breath shallow. "Do you even hear yourself?" "She said this would happen," he muttered. "That you'd try to pull me back. That fear would make you blind." I couldn't hold back the tears. This wasn't just betrayal. It was possession of the mind and the heart. My son had been rewired, his love poisoned. Later that night, I returned to Salma's house, not to confront, but to observe. Her windows glowed with candlelight. Through a small crack in the curtain, I saw her alone, seated in front of a mirror, speaking in a tongue I couldn't understand. She wasn't acting. She believed in whatever power she was channeling. And she had passed that belief to Rayan. I sought out a spiritual healer the next day, one who worked in silence and symbols, who listened more than he spoke. He confirmed what I feared. There's a binding. He's not possessed, but heavily influenced. Someone turned his love into resentment, and it was intentional. My hands shook as I left his studio, but my heart carried something I hadn't felt in days: clarity. Rayan wasn't evil, but someone had led him there. The bond we shared had been twisted, not severed. And if I was to save it, I would need more than answers. I would need strength I hadn't yet discovered. The healer's words echoed in my mind as I prepared for what felt like war. Not one of fists or fury, but of spirit. I could no longer simply observe the unraveling. I had to act. Rayan's soul had been bent beneath someone else's will, and if I didn't step in, I feared he'd be lost forever. That night, I cleansed the house. I opened every window, lit white candles, and burned sage, something the healer had instructed. Your space must reject her energy, he had said. Reclaim your home. As the smoke curled through each room, I whispered every good memory I had with Rayan, bedtime stories, his first day of school, the way he used to hug me without reason. I was calling him back, reminding the house and myself of what once was. Then I waited. Rayan returned after midnight. His face was tired, drawn. He stepped inside and stopped, sniffing the air. "What's that smell?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. "Purity," I replied calmly. "Truth." He blinked, as if trying to shake something loose. I stepped closer, careful not to crowd him. "Rayan, do you remember the day your father left? How you cried in my lap for hours? I never left you, not once. I was your home, even when everything else changed." Something flickered in his gaze, like a cloud passing over the sun. "She said you were lying, that you never loved me," he whispered. "I loved you more than I knew how," I said softly. "And I still do." He looked away, jaw tightening. "I don't know what's real anymore." I reached into my pocket and handed him the pendant that had gone missing, the silver one he had given me on his 12th birthday. "This is real," I said, "and so is the boy who gave it to me." His fingers closed around it and he collapsed into tears. It was like watching ice break. We held each other for what felt like hours, and in that moment, I felt the weight lift. Not fully, but enough. The spell, if that's what it was, had cracked. The next day, I went to Salma's house, not with anger, but with resolve. I knocked. She opened the door, as calm and composed as ever. "You've lost him," I said quietly. Her smile didn't fade. "For now," she murmured. "But energies don't disappear, they just change direction." I left her there, standing in her doorway, no longer a mystery, but a warning. Over the weeks, Rayan returned to himself, though the shadows lingered. We began therapy, spoke of wounds and war, and slowly rebuilt trust, one truth at a time. Some scars remain unseen. Some betrayals cut deeper because they come wearing familiar faces. But healing isn't the absence of pain. It's the choice to keep loving anyway. And though I'll never forget what happened, I now understand. Love isn't what saved us. It was remembering that love had always been there,